there's a lot of real estate speculation happening right now that is really frustrating. And I just want to remind all you real estate investors around the world, like Lahaina is not for sale. Please don't reach out to these families and take advantage of them during the most devastating time of our lives.
That's right. Unsurprisingly, speculators, scammers, and real estate developers are trying to cash in on the tragic conditions left behind by wildfires in Maui. We're going to hear more from Lahaina resident Tiare Lawrence on that very issue in just a bit. But first, let's actually examine what local communities in Maui are grappling with in the aftermath of these devastating fires. So let's take a look at this video. You're watching drone footage from the Washington Post that shows some of the destruction left behind in Lahaina as of August 11th. And as you can see, most structures in the historic town are just completely destroyed. And the state's governor, Josh Green, expects that the cost of rebuilding will top an estimated $6 billion. In addition, the Maui Emergency Management Agency also estimated a similar price tag of $5.52 billion to rebuild in Maui County. Now, while property can be rebuilt, lost lives obviously cannot be brought back. And that's the most tragic part of this story. The death toll rose to 106 people as of this morning. But the number of victims is expected to rise further, considering there are still around 1,300 people missing. Now, identifying those who perished has also been a struggle, and officials are resorting to DNA evidence or DNA analysis to figure out who the remains belong to. They're just having a lot of difficulty identifying, the remains because of how badly, people were just. How badly people, how badly this fire killed people and just completely charred their remains. It's hard to even talk about it or think about it, but nonetheless, after facing some pressure, President Joe Biden announced that he does in fact plan to visit the area soon. And the federal government has already provided some aid to those in need. So for instance, FEMA has made nearly $2 million in payments to about 1,200 survivors as of Tuesday. But about 3,400 people have applied for assistance, said Keith Turry, the Deputy Associate Administrator for Response and Recovery. But here's the real question. This is the important question. Will the federal aid and the home insurance payouts be enough for the residents to rebuild their homes and begin to piece together their lives? There's understandably deep concern about that, especially as these vultures are swooping in to reap the benefits of exploiting this tragedy. Now, Lahaina resident Tiare Lawrence expressed frustration over developers who have already begun reaching out to victims with pretty transactional objectives. Let's watch.
Homeowners have been reached out by investors and realtors offering to buy their land. And this is disgusting. And we just want to make sure that people around the world understand our situation and know that Lahaina is not for sale. It is important that the multi-generational families that come from Lahaina get to continue to live in our hometown. We need to work as a community to ensure that we have a seat at the table on how our town is rebuilt and what that looks like. And it's important that we make sure that the cultural history of Lahaina, the integrity of Lahaina is protected, especially for Native Hawaiian families from Lahaina. We as a Native Hawaiian community, we've already been displaced so much. The cost of living in Hawaii is so high. Your median house goes for $1 million. So, already dealing with that and having an affordable housing crisis, and now this just really scares me and concerns me that there'll be more Native Hawaiian displacement happening on among our community.
I agree with her. I mean, the exploitation that typically takes place following these types of tragedies and disasters is disgusting. And guess what? This isn't the first time speculators have swooped in after a devastating natural disaster. The practice, in fact, is so common that Naomi Klein refers to it as disaster capitalism. For example, Floridians who lost their homes in Fort Myers due to Hurricane Ian last September were informed that, those insurance payouts wouldn't cover the rising costs necessary to rebuild. This partly due to federal rules mandating that the rebuilt homes follow modern flood and wind building codes, which obviously can be exorbitant. Now, left with no choice, many of the residents have just given up. They're deciding to sell the land that their homes once stood on to these developers. Politico analyzed real estate transaction data from that area, and here's what they found. First, storms like Ian wrecked the homes. Then shrinking insurance markets, government rules designed to limit future risk, and still hot demand for housing combined to make some of their communities unaffordable, to say the least. Now, homeowners who want to rebuild often have to pay much of the cost on their own because the federal flood insurance program caps payouts at $250,000 per home, far below coastal areas' market values. By the way, far below the market value in most markets. Let's just keep it real. And the actual insurance payments after Ian were even lower. And so normal working class people are getting pushed out of the community because they simply cannot afford the cost of rebuilding. And that includes retirees, teachers, firefighters, and other people of modest means. It's a perfect opportunity for disaster capitalists. In the fourth quarter of 2022, just after Ian, more than 90% of all sales in Fort Myers were completed without a mortgage, in a sign that all cash buyers were dominating the market. That was at least 10 percentage points higher than the previous all cash peak in early 2009. So these are obviously moneyed interests, institutional investors, speculators. The buyers, according to the transaction data, include people and corporations who clearly can afford to pay $1 million or more in cash. And let me just say, ordinary people can't afford to pay for a home worth $1 million or more in cash. 91 vacant lot sales in Fort Myers Beach, listed on Zillow for May of 2021 through the end of last month, found that 6 of the 9 most expensive transactions in price per square foot came after Ian, with multiple sales exceeding 2.5 million and one fetching 3.2 million. 50 of those sales occurred during the 9 months since Hurricane Ian basically devastated the area. Now, one example is 69-year-old Catherine Light, who decided to sell the land where her powder blue cottage once stood. A real estate developer bought the now vacant lot for $525,000, which, was nearly 4 times what she and her husband had paid in the mid-1990s. But while that might seem like a nice return on investment, there's no way she could ever afford to live in a beach community in Florida again due to rapidly rising housing costs. In fact, considering how high interest rates are, I would be surprised if she was even sure she wanted to take out a mortgage to afford a new home once she relocates. In fact, she told Politico, quote, "The whole beach," meaning Fort Myers Beach, "is going to change completely. The people that could afford to live there in the beach cottages and stuff, they're gone." And understandably, that's exactly what the people of Maui and Lahaina specifically are worried about. Luckily, Hawaii's Governor Josh Green is considering implementing rules that would prevent speculators from cashing in on this tragedy. The governor, Josh Green, said he had reached out to the state's attorney general to discuss a moratorium on property sales in Lahaina. Maui had been facing a serious housing crunch and unaffordable prices even before being hit by the deadliest fire in the US in over a century. Green said he didn't want to see the remains of Lahaina snapped up by developers, and I commend him for that. In fact, here's more from Green during his press conference with the mayor of Maui.
I would caution people that it's going to be a very long time before any growth or housing can be built. And so you will be pretty poorly informed if you try to steal land from our people and then build here.
Governor Green even elaborated on other ways the state plans on helping the wildfire victims in Hawaii, especially as these developers are trying to goad them into selling their land.
We will be embedding attorneys who are going to work pro bono for our people, Maui attorneys for Maui's people, to be at our joint response centers available to all of us. So if people have someone reach out to them to try to get their land, we will be able to get expert legal advice so that doesn't happen. If someone behaves in a predatory fashion towards one of the people that are suffering right now, who have lost their loved ones or lost their home, lost their rental, and they try to buy land out from under them, you can be sure I will not be allowing anyone to build or rezone or do anything of that sort if they've taken advantage of anyone here.
And keep the statement about preventing rezoning in mind as we continue to give you details about this story. Because look, it's great that the local community applied enough pressure to ensure that the governor is actually, looking out for them, and they deserve the opportunity to rebuild. And the thought of moneyed interests taking advantage of this devastation makes me absolutely sick. But look, as climate change continues to create the extreme conditions that exacerbate these natural disasters and make them much more destructive, there needs to be, more done to ensure that the onus and financial burdens are not placed on ordinary citizens. In fact, the industries that have led us to this unstable and dystopian era should be the ones footing the bill, not the taxpayers. Fossil fuel companies and their lucrative business practices basically allowed them to hoard resources and that got us into this mess in the first place. And since they've reaped the financial rewards for doing so, I think it's time for them to pay up. Whatever Josh Green or any other governor in any other state does after these types of natural disasters is simply a band-aid. It's simply dealing with the symptoms of a much bigger issue. And we need to tackle that issue at the root cause. It would definitely have a better response to the very real climate emergency, and it would prevent ordinary people and taxpayers from having to foot the bill after these devastating losses occur. Now, with that said, I do want to read a quick comment from one of our members in the Twitch community. This is from Wee Duncan, who has been a subscriber for 32 months. And this comment is really important, okay? So Wee Duncan says, aloha Casper, mahalo for leading with the Maui story. Many homes were built on land owned by others as leasehold tenants. So that means that you might own the home, but the land that the home is on doesn't belong to you, right? It belongs to another individual. And so here's the concern. The fear is the major landowners will not rebuild small homes, but major resorts. And look, in order for them to be able to do that, that land would need to be rezoned. And as you heard the governor, Governor Green, mentioned in one of the videos, he claims that he is going to prevent the rezoning of these lands, especially if it shows that it's going to hurt the residents who have pretty much lost their homes as a result of these wildfires. Just make sure that you ensure that he stays true to his promise there. But I think that that is definitely another addition to the concerns that the local community has in Maui. These are legitimate concerns. The one silver lining here is, for the first time following this kind of natural disaster, you have local politicians essentially saying, no, we're gonna do what we need to do to protect the local community. We just gotta make sure that they hold true to that promise and that they're held accountable should they stray from that promise. But my heart goes out to the local community. We are gonna continue updating you all on the aftermath of these devastating fires. And if you have any way to reach out to people in Maui, donate resources to them, please do so. It's just absolutely devastating and heartbreaking to see them go through what they're going through right now.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.